everyone, and welcome to this brand new episode of the Jedi Way. I am the Outlaw John Rocha, also known as Rocha Fett, joined as always by my better half on this show, the great Laura Kelly. Laura, how are you?
I'm doing amazing. I'm so excited to be back just a week later. We went so long. It was a massive break, and now here we are a week later. We're already back. People are going to be sick of us. We're fine with that.
Yeah, exactly. We're fine with that. We are definitely going to be, doing it weekly as we review The Mandalorian. And of course, Star Wars Celebration is about a month away, or a little under a month away. So we'll probably take a little bit of a break or try to figure out how to do an episode from there. But certainly going forward, we are going to be weekly here through The Mandalorian stuff. And we're going to talk about other things as well. Obviously, we're going to review Chapter 18 of The Mandalorian here in the first half of the show. The second half of the show, we're going to focus on the panels that were announced just a couple days ago for Star Wars Celebration there in London, and talk about what we can expect, what are the ones we're looking forward to, and what we think we might be getting or not getting, because certainly Star Wars has pulled the old switcheroo every once in a while at these celebrations, especially when it comes to feature films, and especially on the heels of that news this week about Feige's film, about Patty Jenkins's film, and about Taika Waititi's film. So a lot that we're going to dive into in the second half of the show. But the first half of the show, we're definitely diving into Chapter 18, The Mines of Mandalore, here from The Mandalorian Season 3. So, Laura Kelly, let's not waste any time here. Let's jump into it. Overall, what are your thoughts on this episode 2? So much happened here that we thought maybe would drag out over a few episodes. Bam, we got everything. We got Mandalore. We got the astromech from the old days coming on back. We got a Mythosaur by the end of this thing. We got so much. And Bo Katan coming back to her homeworld instead of sitting and brooding on that throne and actually getting in on some action here. Plus Grogu using his Jedi powers, or his Force powers rather. So what do you think about this entire episode here so early in Season 3 of The Mandalorian?
It was certainly a lot. It was a lot. And I really, if they had just had like the big Bo Katan component in this episode, I would have been totally fine. I would have been just as excited as I am now. But we had so much more than that. And it was amazing. It was just amazing. And notably, and maybe I'm wrong because I haven't like sat and done a word count of the scripts. I feel like there's a lot more dialogue in this episode. In the first one too, I feel like we're getting a lot more conversations. Not that there's like less action. I don't think that's the case at all. I just feel like we're getting a lot more talking. It's a lot more Din talking to the baby. We had a lot of conversation happening between Bo and Din Djarin in this, even between Bo and Grogu. It was just fantastic. So I really enjoyed that component of it that maybe in my head, maybe it's not. It seems like it's a lot more talking and I'm still totally fine with it. But yes, there were so many amazing things that returned to the Star Wars world on screen. Some of it in live action for the first time. Some of it just for the first time in general. I mean, how? I can't. If you had asked me like all of the different big reveals they could have done at the end of this episode, never in my life, ever would I have guessed it's going to be an underwater Mythosaur. That never would have ever crossed anybody's mind, really. But it crossed Jon Favreau's, and we are grateful for that. What was your reaction to this first one?
I mean, I loved it. I've seen it 3 times now because it really was just so much fun to have such an action-packed episode this early in the season. We've kind of accepted the rhythm of The Mandalorian of the first 2 seasons. It's an adventure a week, an overall story, but certainly an adventure a week. And certainly last week, we got to get that memory unit. We got to get that memory unit. And it begins that way in Peli Motto's garage there with the poor Rodian getting screwed over. We get that whole situation there, but then it's a complete swerve when we head on off to Mandalore and how quickly we head there and all the things that Din goes through while he's there. And it's great because there's also, we're still keeping tabs on this philosophical discussion of who's right and who's wrong. Is the armorer right? Is Bo Katan right? What is the truth about Mandalore? And we got all of that in here. And you're right, the Mythosaur. I mean, I was like DiCaprio in that meme, like pointing at the screen when it happened. And every single time I've seen it, it still gives me chills. I'm a huge Mandalorian fan, not just the show, but I've been a Boba Fett fan since the 1980s because I've always kind of seen him as the Latino character in Star Wars. That's all in my head, but I've always felt that way. So I've had a kinship with Mandalorians. I like the warrior culture. So to see a Mythosaur come through here, I just was blown away by what it means. And the thing is, when you look at it now in retrospect, it's like they kind of laid the groundwork for this since that Book of Boba Fett episode, talking about, oh, it's not real. It's, I don't think this is supposed to be some new age that's coming, or what have you. And even having Bo Katan, like, it's a neon sign now when you go back and watch the episode when she's reading the commemorative plaque that's there. It's like pretty much like ding, 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 ding. We got a Mythosaur coming. Get ready. And just seeing those eyes move around. It's like finding a T-Rex in the wild randomly. It just is insane. So just incredible stuff here. And I think you're right about the dialogue. It's a very dialogue heavy episode, back and forth. And even when Grogu wasn't talking, or the Alamites weren't talking, or whatever the hell that creature, that General Grievous cousin isn't talking, like we don't hear much from them, but certainly there's interactions going on. And Bo Katan even like really, I mean, Bo Katan clearly needs someone to talk to, Laura,
Yes.
because she is just, unloading all this stuff on Grogu, who's like, look, I love you, but we're trying to find Din here,
Right.
So I just really enjoyed it from top to bottom. Had the right amount of humor, the right amount of seriousness and stakes, and the right amount of feeling of old school Star Wars, which I really appreciated.
100%. You bring up Peli and those
Yeah.
sort of opening scenes, and I feel like I saw a lot of commentary online this morning from some of the early reaction of people saying, sort of acting like this kind of stopped the episode dead a little bit. It was a little bit of a slow start. That's fine. I understand that element. I understand that there are a lot of people who don't necessarily appreciate the sort of lightness, humor, and the kind of very specific brand of element of weird that Peli brings to this show. I get it if that's not for you. I get that that doesn't land for everyone, but I really appreciate her for all of those things, just that she brings that sort of lightness and that weirdness to this story. But the fact of the matter was that I was so focused on R5D4 coming back into this story, and it just was like just taking me right back to like that first time that I read that story in the anthology from a certain point of view, the red one that's written by Ray Carson. It's a fantastic story centered on R5D4 and his sort of backstory. And the first time I read that story, I was on public transportation and just started crying in public because it's so good. It's that good. It's 100% worth picking up the book just for that story alone, I think. But I really enjoyed that they just acknowledged that and that they brought that sort of back into this story. And I was so tickled by that I'm like, I don't even care what else is happening in this. I love that it's Boon to Eve. I love that there are fireworks. I love that we had to bring Grogu just to see the fireworks and see his delighted little expression of awe. I was all for it. But the fact that, she sold R5 to Din, it sounds like maybe R5 is going to be around for a while. Question mark. Hopefully, maybe. I don't know.
It's one of these characters or droids that people come back to in the writing, right? I think there was a Dark Horse comic that explored his backstory as well. There were some of the backstories that he blew his top on, or it blew its top on purpose so that R2D2 would take the initiative here, would be the droid or the astromech that gets with Luke and ends up saving the universe, saving the gas. Certainly there's a different Star Wars somewhere, and people love multiverses nowadays. In an alternate universe where that astromech is the one that goes instead of R2D2. And so I thought to think of all those possibilities as I'm watching this is really great. Plus, for an old school guy like me, I know that design. I probably had that toy as a kid, the light blue with the red, all of it. Just, I was like, oh my God, I totally remember this thing. So it was like being a kid again for a few seconds as I watched that droid show up. But also, it gave, I love that they gave the droid all this personality, right? I mean, the shaking, the pulling back, and having Peli Motto. Yeah, and Peli Motto's a divisive character, just like Bill Burr is in The Mandalorian. And so you just but I like that we have these characters. I think they do give life and spirit to the show and fun. And not every character should be appealing to everybody. So I like that Peli Motto is very much her own thing. Plus, Amy Sedaris is an incredibly brilliant actress and comedic actress. So the stuff that she works is just hilarious. The stuff with the Rhodian is hilarious. And then the stuff with the Jawa. And then when she's speaking Jawa, which I'm like, you were just speaking English to them. Now you need to speak Jawa to them. It's all so good in what she does. And then her going like, I can't hear you anymore. All right, take care. See ya. It's so perfect to kind of take a little bit of the edge off of the higher stakes stuff that we were getting to right afterwards when we got on Mandalore. What did you think about the whole Mandalorian how can I say, experience, adventure, because certainly Mando asks Grogu, are you ready for an adventure? What did you think about everything that happened on Mandalore with the Mandalorian here with Din? Everything they experienced, like going down there, seeing the mines, realizing from the readings that the armorer was wrong and that Bo Katan was right, that Mandalore is not cursed, and then going deeper and then fighting whatever the hell that thing was. I mean, killing the Alamites. Still not good with the Darksaber, Laura. Still not great with the Darksaber. He got the job done,
No.
but it was a struggle. And then down there, and then seeing the flippant way that droid, sentient creature, whatever the hell that thing is, threw away all his weapons and essentially put him on a spit. And we saw all those helmets of the other Mandalorians that have been caught or have gone down there. So a very dark kind of approach to this kind of stuff before we get to Grogu heading off to get Bo Katan to help Din. What did you think about all of this stuff up until that point?
I mean, I really enjoyed these like darker sort of horror elements that we brought into this episode. I thought it was really exciting. It was something a little bit different. Maybe a little bit dark in terms of the actual like picture, but I didn't personally have any problems seeing it. I saw some people sort of making some Game of Thrones comparisons today. I did not experience that. I mean, I feel like I could see everything that I needed to see just fine.
Oh, they're saying it's too dark. Oh, how fun.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So yeah, and I thought that was interesting, but I was also, I mean, it was like 6 in the morning here, so it was also still a little dark, which probably worked in my favor, but I don't know. But I very much enjoyed it. This weird droid character spider thing that comes apart 3 different times in this episode. I mean, like legitimately terrifying, especially the fact that we've got like a very photoreal eyeball in this make-believe thing. It was extremely like, it just threw me off in a huge way, that I haven't felt that sort of unsettled by a Star Wars thing in a very long time. So it was something different, and I kind of appreciated that. But I'm very worried about the long-term effects of whatever it was injecting Din with. I'm like, how long is it going to take to circle back to that to figure out what that was? And what it's going to do to him. So that'll be an adventure, I imagine, for another day. Maybe they won't address it at all. Maybe it was nothing. I don't know. Maybe it was just something to make him taste better. Was it going to eat him? You're right. We're like kind of roasting him over a spit, but does the droid eat? I don't know. I don't know, but it's fine. But I legitimately enjoyed this adventure. It was really nice being back in like the sort of Mandalorian culture. We saw so much of that in the animated series. This was a very different view, a very different time compared to what we've seen in the Clone Wars and in Rebels. And it was just really fascinating because we got a lot of Mandalorian history in this, and we got a lot of even backstory of like, I mean, the backstory between Bo Katan and her father, and hearing her process of going through this sort of initiation and taking the creed, and everybody watching and her parents watching proudly. Like, all of this was so interesting to get a little bit deeper into this culture that we kind of already thought, many of us who've watched the animated series, we thought we knew this fairly well. I learned a lot today in this episode. So I was just thrilled with it. So overall, in terms of, as a Mandalorian fan, as much of a Mandalorian fan as you are of the culture and the history, what was your take on all of this? I imagine you were just giddy.
Yeah, from the opening shots, as soon as we saw the devastation. By the way, wonderful production design for all of that. I know it's probably CGI'd most of it, but just it was beautiful to see from above. Even though there were ruins, it was great to kind of see Mandalore again, and the way the clouds broke and the different reactions that Din had versus Bo. Like, KATEE Sackhoff is just such a good actress. Her playing the nuances of her feelings as we're seeing these close-ups on her. There's a smirk, a little bit of a slight smile she has when she goes to Mandalore and breaks the clouds, because she's seeing it again probably for the first time in a while. And then when she talks about the devastation, it used to be beautiful. There's a pride. There's a sense of loss. All of that is working there in tandem with her performance. So I think it's fantastic. With Din, it's just a different approach. I love that we got to go into these places. I love the way he's talking about it and seeing everything. And, after he sends R5 in there and brings him out and saves him from those Alamites, the conversation that he has with with Grogu about the planet and about the culture, and then walking down underneath and seeing all the different levels that they're at. I mean, it felt almost a little bit like Rey in The Force Awakens when she's scavenging that huge ship. I had a little bit of those vibes as well near the beginning of Force Awakens. I had a little bit of those vibes with Din here as he's going down and going to multiple levels. It almost felt like a little bit like a video game, right? Like darting around certain areas and avoiding things that are getting in your way. And then gets down there and he sees these helmets. This was a little bit, how can I say this? A little bit like King Arthur. The film Excalibur, when they go for the Grail, all these things happen to all these knights because they're distracted by things or they're trapped or whatever. And you see all the bodies hanging from trees, the skeletons or their swords and their armor and their shields on the ground because they didn't complete the quest or they were killed. So seeing him look at all these helmets on the ground, these are all the Mandalorians that were either killed by the Alamites and became meals, as Bo tells us later, or killed by whatever this Grievous cousin thing is. And so it's just there's a lot of darkness and death here and people who are sacrificed. So in my mind, has the Armorer been sending people to Mandalore or teasing them to go to Mandalore to eliminate them from the cult? What is the concept here? So there's a lot in my mind about how we ended up with all these dead Mandalorian helmets down there. So just have a lot of thoughts. But overall, it was great to see all of this from down below above in live action. So I was really, really excited about that.
I really love a conspiracy theory about the armor. I hope, oh my God. And that you just opened so many doors. I can't wait to see how this plays out. And if that actually happens, like, holy shit.
I don't trust her. I think now, like a cult leader, you want to get rid of the ones that question the cult or go against the cult. And she seems to be very much in Paz Vizsla's camp. And certainly he fought him in the Book of Boba Fett episode and won. So, but she's still with Paz. So to me, this is an armor who's maybe figuring out who she thinks has the most power, has the most ability to take control of Mandalore. And so she's siding with them over Din, even though when we hear Bo talk about it later, the idea that, I once ruled for a little time, and we feel like Din wants to bring everybody back. The creed, what do we have if we don't have the creed? I think he wants to bring all the Mandalorians back to Mandalore and possibly either he rule or maybe down the road, Bo Katan rules again, but not the armor. So I think there's a little bit of the changing tide here that's happening with her intentions and her goals, the way she's tricking Din a little bit. So that's why I feel that way about that situation. So let's move on to what happens when Din gets captured. Grogu tries to use his force power to free him, which ends up causing that creature thing, that droid creature thing, to come after him. And Din tells him to go get Bo Katan. He flips out of there, like I forget what Peli Motto called it, a limmer or something like that. Flips out of there, rolls on up, gets into the N1, takes off, avoiding that dragon creature. Rolls to Bo. Bo comes out, who now has moved to this position on the throne, but she comes out and she says, "Man, leave me the hell alone." And she realizes Din's not there. They download the astromech. They roll back to get the coordinates. They roll back to Mandalore. And as I mentioned, we see Bo's reaction. But then Bo, once they land, talking with Grogu about the history of Mandalore, about what happened during her time there. As you mentioned, her father. It almost seemed like a little bit like she was the daughter, as we've seen before in Clone Wars, the daughter who didn't 100% measure up to her sister. And so that little bit of angst between them. Plus, she's still flying the fighter that is connected to the Death Watch. And there's a lot of rumors that this clan that Din is in is the next or evolved out of Death Watch. So what's that connective tissue that I wonder if we're going to explore? And then all the things she does to free Din and then eventually lead him to the waters of Mandalore there, or so he could dive in there. So, and then of course saving him and her reaction to seeing the Mythosaur. So what do you think of how they use Grogu to get Bo, and then Bo taking care of business, and then trying to stop Din, and then eventually helping him go into those waters?
Well, there's an alignment here happening with Din and Grogu where we see very clearly that Din Djarin has not quite mastered the Darksaber, even after the armorer's lessons. in the book of Boba Fett, we are still struggling a little bit to lift that thing. And at the same time, Grogu hasn't quite mastered his Force capabilities there. So they're aligned in some ways, which I think is actually perfect. And I think it makes a lot of sense that Din wouldn't come out of the one lesson he got from the armor wielding this thing with without any effort at all. So I think that this works actually. It was kind of funny. It added a little bit of humor to this, and then especially later when we see Bo pick it up and wield it like a master. Oh my god, 100% here for it. I was like, all hail our Queen Bo. I was just screaming the entire episode. I love it so much. But you mentioned KATEE Sackhoff's acting in this. Her like micro expressions, as they're approaching the surface of Mandalore, it's just perfection. I mean, just you can see it the little tiny shifts on her face of like the devastation and the anger of seeing what happened, but also just this like anticipation and excitement. It's like, and it's all there on her face. Like at one time, I'm like, I don't know how you do that, but brilliant. She's bringing great gravitas to this character, and I'm so grateful for it. But this journey that Grogu goes on his own, I love that we kind of built up to it. You know, I mean, I think I can just hear the angry fanboys if we hadn't had this sort of lesson with Din towards the beginning of this episode of him being like, to be a Mandalorian, you need to learn how to navigate the galaxy and how to read a map, and therefore you'll never be lost. And we know now that Grogu is taking that into account in a big way. He's definitely understanding it, even though he kind of just sits there looking like a cute baby. He's taking it all in, and I appreciate that. But the fact that he then is able to put those lessons to use and go find Bo Katan himself, I was so proud. I was so proud watching him. And I like that we're already moving in this sort of direction with Grogu, where while he may not have mastered all of his Force capabilities yet, he sure can flip really well into Peli's arms out of the N1. And he can go on this little mini micro mission by himself to retrieve Bo Katan for help. Bo Katan, who I'm not totally sure how Din has survived this long without her. We can get more into that, but like, she came to the rescue quite a few times in this episode, and I am all for that. I continue to be a little bit worried that they're going to like go in a Scarlet Witch direction with Bo Katan and turn her into a villain this season. The trailers kind of made it seem like they might be doing it, and I don't know if I trust the creators enough to not go that direction, but I really hope that they don't. And these episodes sort of make it seem like we're not going that way, but at the same time, he picks up the Darksaber later in this episode, and she very quickly tells him, "Oh no, I'll go with you. I'll show where the living waters are." And I'm like, girl, do you have alternative motives here? I don't know.
That's a good point.
I don't know.
But a good show keeps you guessing. And I like that. We don't know what the armor's true intentions are here. Why was she so wrong about Mandalore? Why was she so adamant at telling him that he cannot go and bathe there because the entire surface is poisoned or contaminated, so you can't go? Sorry for you. And why is she the one that doesn't believe that the prophecy of the Mythosaur returning will herald a new age of Mandalore? Why is she so dead set against it? So there's a lot of questions here. And now I look back at episode 1 with that mythical alligator type creature coming out of the water. Was that a foreshadowing of this Mythosaur showing up to also destroy the armorer's plans of wanting to take over Mandalore? Because I got a feeling she wants the clan Vizsla to take over Mandalore again and put her in a position of power. So that's how I'm looking at it. But I hear you on Bo. Bo, we know Bo can go her own path for sure when she feels like it. And I think there were enough things throughout this episode that you could see the old Bo Katan come out. You know, in that moment when what does she say to him? She's talking about her time in charge and I once ruled this place. I once was in charge of everything. And, I didn't embarrass my dad. And my dad died defending Mandalore. And we have a great "this is the way" moment from Din, like out of respect to her father. So there's a lot that's still in there for her. And then talking about her compared to what a princess would do, all these things. So there's a lot here that's still bubbling under the surface. And now that she's seen the Mythosaur, which she had said to Din just a few minutes earlier, it's admirable how much you believe in these children's stories and these legends, essentially defiling his belief system. For her to see the Mythosaur, what is that going to inspire in Bo? We know Bo, if Bo sees a path to leadership, Bo will take it. So now that she's seen the Mythosaur, which legend tells will herald a new era of Mandalore, does she think now that she has been chosen yet again to lead Mandalore and to unite the people, will she take that as this like one a singular vision to achieve power no matter who stands in her way? So the fact that it can go any number of ways, I think, is a great place to be in after 2 episodes of this season.
I think that's fair enough. I think you're right in that they are. I think if they keep us guessing, I can be fine with that. I don't want her to get Scarlet Witch. I mean, like, I feel like this was such a badass Bo episode. I feel like I felt when I left the theater the first time I saw the Wonder Woman movie. Like, I remember I was like so pumped, and I'm like, try to fight me, bitch. I'm like, I remember like reading I read a funny tweet afterwards where somebody was just like, is this how men feel when they leave the theater after watching action movies? I'm like, that's how I felt when I left that movie, and that's how I left this episode. I'm like, this is so much badass, heroic Bo Katan content. I could watch a show of just this, to be honest.
Just be careful of your back, Laura. Just be careful of your back. Everything
I know, right?
Just guard that back. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. It was great to see her interactions even with Grogu, right? She has that moment where she says to him, "What are you looking at?" Right? So a little bit of a funny moment between them as well that I thought was really great. But there are philosophical discussions when they light the fire after she immediately after she dismantles that thing with the Darksaber a second time, cuts it to pieces, literally. When they're there over the fire, there is this conversation. She's like, "I'm going to get you to my ship. I'll take you home." He's like, "I can't. I got to go and do this in the waters there, and I have to go and do this." And we have this discussion about the creed, this discussion about uniting the scattered clans, but even Bo earlier referenced how everyone fought together. And in fact, the Jedi fought side by side with the Mandalorians in the past. And we have again that moment where she turns to Grogu and says, "Do you think you were the only Mandalorian? Your dad was the only Mandalorian." So there's still a sense of pride, a sense of how she thinks things should go. So I like that we're having these kind of philosophical discussions about the future of Mandalore and how it should be ruled if people were to come back, And don't forget, she was just brooding in a castle a few hours ago. Now, what is she going to do now that she's seen the Mythosaur, now that she's shown how she can be with that Darksaber, because of course she has experience with it? Will she feel compelled to lead? And I kind of like that as a nice element to this whole season here of The Mandalorian.
Right, this fireside chat is fantastic because we're getting so much in this short period, because we sort of go on we've got this sort of moment of building where she's talking about like making, or how she grew up eating this soup, and
the fog soup.
Din Djarin's like, I'm the one that like grew, basically his whole attitude is that I grew up the right way and I learned the creed, and I'm like the one and only way is the armorer's way, apparently, and yet he's never had this soup that all Mandalorian children ate. So the fact, and she points out that irony, and I think that these two characters are going to get on the same page at some point this season, where he's talking about how their people are scattered across the galaxy and they need to be united, and she is talking about how she's frustrated with the fact that all of the Mandalorians were fighting amongst each other and haven't been able to come together underneath any one ruler. And I think that they just haven't quite gotten there to figure out that they are fighting for the same thing. And once they get there, I'm like, these two could be like unstoppable as a team. So I hope that we get to that point eventually. But before we do, we have to have a couple of himbo Din Djarin moments. And himbo Din Djarin is my second favorite. Din Djarin, second only to Daddy Din Djarin, when he's being a good dad to Grogu, because it's very cute. But this man is such a beautiful idiot sometimes. My brother in Christ, you cannot jump into a body of water when you are covered literally head to toe in metal. I can't believe I have to say this. Like, but it's also kind of on point for Din Djarin to make these kinds of mistakes sometimes. And it certainly led to some tension in this episode, and another heroic moment for Bo, which I very much enjoyed.
Yeah, I like that she has these moments, because of course what we've seen in Clone Wars sometimes, that Bo can get ahead of herself. Bo can get too aggressive. Bo can be a little too headstrong. So seeing her have these moments where she's saving, where she listens to baby Grogu, she doesn't send them away. She says, we got to figure out where he went. She goes with baby Grogu, and then even kind of becomes a secondary guide, because we saw earlier how Din was teaching Grogu how to be a Mandalorian. She is now teaching him the history of Mandalore and what happened between everyone, and the breakup, and the thing that you talked about. I said a great talk about how if we fight amongst ourselves, we will be fodder for a stronger power determined to destroy us. And I think there's a little bit of a lesson there that applies to our modern world nowadays, where we're all at each other's throats in tribalism. If another power comes in, they can take advantage of our fractious situation going on, and that could be something dangerous for all of us. So it feels like almost like a little bit of a warning from Star Wars about what's going on in our real world. And I love that. But having Bo talk about that, hearing her, having her heroic moments where she saves Din twice just in that one sequence with the droid thing, and then diving down into the water where he's just seems like he's passed out, just lying there in the sand, and then saving him and seeing the Mythosaur. But you're right, absolutely. He is so trained to fight and to adhere to the creed. Sometimes his common sense eludes him in certain moments. And exactly, a beautiful idiot is a perfect way to describe him, as he jumps into the water and then woof, immediately goes right down. So I like that they keep the vulnerability of the Mandalorian always, even though even though he's such a badass. I love that they have the vulnerability there. And I agree with you. I mean, I glimpsed the possibility of a Bo Katan, Mandalorian, Grogu, IG-11, Grief Karga crew back to back with each other, shooting around in a circular shot here with a camera as they fight off all these people coming after him, or all these species or whatever coming after him. So there's a possibility that there's this crew being built here as we go along for the rest of the season, for sure. Is there anything more that we missed that you want to make sure we hit? I mean, the music was great. Oh, wait, Rachel Morrison's direction. This is the first time she's ever directed anything in Star Wars. It's great, Laura. She was fantastic as a director here, right?
She was. This is fantastic. It was so great. And the score stood out to me as well. I mean, we've got Joseph Shirley doing the score now in this season. Still get all of our main themes, which are great, from Ludwig Göransson. But I think it was a very seamless transition to Joseph Shirley, and it very noticeable. But yeah, the fact that we got this fantastic episode out of this director who's not directed in Star Wars before, give her more. Give her more. I give her a whole series. You can do what you did with Deborah Chow and just give her more to do, because this was perfection. And I so enjoyed it. And I mean, especially the fact that this seemed like such a Bo Katan centric episode. I mean, bring her back for a future Bo Katan centric episode. I kind of hope that the rest of the season is Bo Katan centric. It won't be. I'll be let down by that if I lean too hard into that. But if you're going to do it again, I would happily see this director back.
Yeah, me too. It's amazing. You know, once again, I know that sometimes Favreau gets and Filoni get a little bit of crap because they're like, we're going to write all the episodes and whatever. I saw people rebel against that, but like they have had so many women direct episodes of Star Wars, and some of these names I've never heard before, like Steph Green and then now Rachel Morrison, and finding out, you know, this is their first time and they're doing such incredible work. I hope it just, you know, once again, just breaks that stupid stigma about female directors, man. It's regardless of gender, direction is good direction is good direction. If you're a good director, it shouldn't fucking matter. So getting the opportunities, giving the opportunities, having them earn their opportunities to be, I think it's all great. And it's great to see different perspectives on the approaches to Star Wars. So it, you know, it just proves the myth that this whole idea of like, well, it's because there aren't that many opportunities. Why is that? Because you're not giving women more opportunities. So now that we're seeing that happen more and more, I hope as the years go by, this becomes so commonplace that it's not a big deal anymore, because I mean, it's just great. It's just great to see it happening. And I would argue it's very hard to do great direction in a Star Wars episode, because there's a lot of demands on you, especially an episode like this, which has a lot of connections to stuff from the past, along with what is happening in the present of the show, which I think is really well done by Rachel throughout the entire episode, you know?
Right, I imagine you would have needed to do a decent amount of research to get up to speed
Yeah,
on all of this, on all of
yeah,
the bunch of the animated content and so on. Like,
right.
whatever she did, keep doing it because it was great. And Filoni and Favreau are definitely building up a great roster of people to
Yeah,
come work on this show, and the fact that they're sort of their franchise here is sort of growing and expanding with Ahsoka and with Skeleton Crew. I hope that that continues to be the
yeah,
case for sure. One other point I wanted to make
yeah.
on
Please.
this episode before we move on was that I there were a couple of moments where I kept thinking Din's helmet was going to come off when Bo pulls him out of the water. I'm like, oh, she's going to have to revive him, and she's going to have to pull his helmet off, and it's going to defeat the whole purpose of this whole thing of him coming to be redeemed in the living waters. He's got to
He's
go
got
through
to
the whole
dive
thing
next.
again. And it didn't happen. And I think even after he like got, injured and was sort of passed out but right before their fireside chat, I thought the same thing. I'm like,
Right.
we're just gonna leave him. We're not gonna check him. Just gonna trust that he's fine in there, I guess. So, but it did make me wonder. I wonder how
Mm,
much, if any, helmetless Din Djarin will get in this season,
yeah.
especially if he seems to still be leaning so hard into this cult's mentality and in their ways. I mean, we were all kind of hoping he was getting away from that a little bit, but he just seems to be leaning in harder and harder. So
Yeah.
we'll see what the sort of results are of this experience that he's had now in these living waters.
I want to walk out on a wire a little bit. I'm probably going to get shit from some of you guys watching the show or listening to
Ooh.
our show. But as I said earlier, for me, Boba Fett, the Mandalorians have always been like the Latinos of Star Wars for me, or the Hispanic people of Star Wars for me. So the fact that taking off your helmet is a big deal for this clan, it reminds me of the luchador wrestlers. In luchador wrestling, having your mask removed is massive. It is huge. It is not something that is done. You will lose a match before you let them take your mask off. So when another wrestler takes the mask off, which is very rare, it is meant to impugn you and to make you seem lesser than and to really embarrass you, right? Like we saw, if you know the history of samurai, when they cut the knot at the top of the hair, that's meant to, in essence, to emasculate you as a samurai. And in this situation with luchadors taking the mask, so the fact that he can't, taking off the mask is a big deal, and you've got to go get redeemed. I think there's a lot of illusions there that I make in my mind looking at it that I think are great for me. Let's hit real quick these Easter eggs, Laura, and see which one strikes out at you. We know about the Mandalore. Give a little bit of background of things real quick. Mandalore was introduced in issue number 68 of Marvel's classic Star Wars comics in 1983. But George Lucas, first came up with the idea of Mandalore while he was creating Boba Fett in The Empire Strikes Back. The Mines of Mandalore are under the Civic Center at Sundari, which of course we saw back in the Clone Wars. And the Mythosaur here, according to ancient Mandalorian legend, these giant creatures used to walk the planet of Mandalore, and warriors used to even ride them around in battle. And the skull of that's what you see when the Mandalorian is that skull. That is the skull of the Mythosaur. So great to see that here. We hear a reference to Mandalore the Great. Bo Katan says that, which was a leader from the distant past. He's a creation for this version of the Mandalorian in this Disney canon, but might be connected to what we've seen in Legends with Mandalore the Ultimate, who led his people in a great conquest against the Old Republic. And there is stuff with that in Knights of the Old Republic. The Alamites, those creatures that attacked Din Djarin, Bo Katan, and Grogu before Grogu sends one of them right out of the cave, which was a great moment as well. Those are
It was.
new for Star Wars, which is pretty cool. Bo Katan's ship that she's flying is a Comrade class fighter, which, as I said, is connected to the Death Watch. So still a part of that, maybe in some strange spiritual way. We don't know. Concordia, of course, is where Din was saying that he was raised, as opposed to Kalevala, which is where Bo Katan is. We've talked about R5D4. Boonta Eve on Tatooine is a holiday that commemorates the glory of the Hutts. So and that's also when Anakin won his freedom from Watto, was the pod race on Boonta Eve. So seeing something simulating a pod race at the opening of the episode, and then seeing her get the best of a Rodian at the beginning of the episode, I think was a nice little reference. Plus, Peli Motto mentions chance cubes, which is what was used there, which is what Watto made the bet with Qui-Gon in the Force Awakens over Anakin. So we see that, and of course, as I mentioned, a Rodian being there at the beginning. So Any of these Easter eggs stand out to you, or anything Easter eggs you want to talk about real quick before we wrap up our review?
I don't know if I have too much to add. I didn't notice those. I didn't make the sort of Phantom Menace connections there of the Chance Cube call out, and I thought so. That's great. That's fantastic, and I like that. We're paying homage to the prequels in these series every now and then, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. We'll see what's to come. All right, well, let's take a quick break. That's our spoiler review for The Mandalorian, Chapter 18 here, The Mines of Mandalore. We're going to jump into talking a little bit of Star Wars Celebration with these panels being announced, and maybe get Laura's thoughts on the news about the movies that were issued here by Star Wars, about which ones are going to happen, which ones are not going to happen here, right after this. See, I found one, Laura. I found one. All right, here we go.
I like it.
All right, Laura Kelly. So much happening here at Star Wars Celebration. We're just weeks away, literally weeks away, under a month away here. And there have been complete panel schedule was released for this year's Star Wars Celebration. I think I'll share my screen and we'll go through it all here. Oh, maybe I can't. Oh, here we go. Let me share my screen here. Here we go. You can see that, right?
I can, yeah.
Okay, so Friday, April 7th, we have the Lucasfilm Studio Showcase, which is 11 a.m. 12:30 p.m. Then the Making of Andor Season 1, which is 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. at the celebration stage. Saturday, we'll have the Ahsoka stuff from 11 a.m. to 12. 40 years of the Return of the Jedi, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. The Young Jedi Adventure screening at 3 p.m., which is something a lot of people are looking forward to as well. Then moving to Sunday, Villains of the Sequel Trilogy, Star Wars The High Republic. I could pretty much put Laura in the front row for that one. A look back at Obi-Wan Kenobi there in the afternoon. And then on Monday, Star Wars The Bad Batch at 11 a.m., Star Wars Visions Volume 2 at 1 p.m., Doug Chiang on Obi-Wan and Mando at 2:30 p.m., and then the closing ceremony. So what panels stick out to you here, Laura? And are there any other panels that you want to highlight here as we look at Star Wars Celebration?
Well, they've only announced the panels, it seems, for the bigger stages. So we don't have the full schedule yet. I imagine that's coming in the next couple of weeks or so. And, we'll get the lotteries opening up for these bigger panels here hopefully soon. So hopefully we'll have a better idea very shortly of what exactly we got into and what we didn't. But on this list, I have 2 priorities, John.
Okay.
You know what these 2 priorities are because it's fairly predictable for me.
I mean, I'm going to guess the High Republic, and I'm going to guess Ahsoka.
That's correct. That is correct. And it's a bit the other way around for order. I mean, Ahsoka is kind of the one, that's the 11 a.m. panel that I will commit unspeakable acts to get into if I don't get a lottery win for that. So it will be in everybody's favor to just make sure I get a lottery win for that panel. The rest of them you can keep. So I'm very excited for that. The High Republic actually they released, I think, an episode of the High Republic show today or recently, at least. So I watched that interview where they talked about what is going to be talked about in this panel for the High Republic that's happening on Saturday. This will be another high priority for me to try and be in the front row, as you say, for this, for sure, because they are going to be talking a lot about Phase 2, which we're in the midst of right now, which is extremely strong, but I don't feel like has had quite as much of a draw as Phase 1 did, but they're also going to be spending some time talking a little bit about Phase 3, which is going to pick up, as I understand it, is going to pick up shortly after the events of Phase 1. So I'm getting very excited for that. There's a book coming out that's I think it's a young adult anthology series of the High Republic.
Oh, wow.
That's going to include stories from both Phase 1 and 2 and 3. And Entertainment Weekly just this week released an excerpt from one of those Phase 3 stories. So it's building up. All of those things are just building up my excitement for the High Republic in such a big way. That'll 100% be a priority, I think. But the Ahsoka one, I mean, without question, we'll get a trailer. We got just a little bit of footage at Celebration Anaheim just this past year. And I have to, I mean, now they're saying that the show's going to be coming out late summer. I have to think that we're going to be getting trailer. We're going to get maybe we'll get a clip or 2. We'll get some sort of footage. We'll get to see hopefully some familiar characters. And maybe they'll do a little bit of not so much revealing who some of the actors are, but confirming some of them. We know that we know many of the names that are going to be in the show, but a lot of that is not officially confirmed by Lucasfilm. So maybe that will actually be finalized a little bit in some way. What is on your list here? What are the high priority items we got to hit?
Well, the number one thing has to be that studio showcase, and not just because, like, it's supposedly the granddaddy that kicks it off there. But I remember Star Wars Celebration, which really feels like it was yesterday. I swear to God,
It does,
right? It's insane. But I remember being there in the room for that one, and that was an incredible experience, having John Williams come out and conduct live, having Harrison Ford come out. But then they pitched Willow, and they pitched all these. They announced Skeleton Crew. They with Jude Law. They had all this stuff that they did. But reuniting Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor on stage. All these things that they did, and the Mandalorian and Andor. So all of the stuff that they did, I thought was fantastic. So for me, I'm even more curious to be there for this one, because there were hints that there might be a movie or something announced. This time around, I'm very, very curious to hear what they're going to announce, if they're going to announce a movie, because that has been the thing that people have been talking about now more and more. When are we going to get theatrical release Star Wars? Yeah, we're enjoying the shows. We just finished reviewing The Mandalorian. We enjoy these things, but when are we getting that movie? It's almost, people are starting to get hungry to put that tentpole in the ground so they can see what's next for Star Wars. So I wonder if we're going to get the announcement, or a couple of announcements, of these movies that might be coming here at that presentation. And I imagine there'll probably be a little bit of the new Indiana Jones film as well, and what they're going to do next with all of that. So I just am very curious to see what we're going to get on that one. The making of Andor was probably something I'll attend and have fun watching, because I love that show so much. So I'm looking forward to that. Saturday's going to be interesting. I might be doing something else on Saturday. Laura and I talked about it off camera. I don't know, but maybe. But if I'm not, I'm obviously going to try my damnedest to be in the Ahsoka thing. I love Return of the Jedi, so to be there for that would be a lot of fun. We'll see what happens with the Jedi Adventures. High Republic, I'm not up on, so I'm not jumping on top of that. But Obi-Wan Kenobi, I don't know, as it's not necessarily one that I thoroughly enjoyed. But the Bad Batch stuff on April would be fun to see as kind of a wrap up. And is Bad Batch going to be done by the time? I imagine it will, right? By the time that panel happens on Monday. I think.
I don't know. I don't have my calendar in front of me. I have it all on my calendar, but I
yeah.
don't have it in front of me at the moment, so I couldn't say.
But the Star Wars Visions one, I'm a massive fan of Visions. So I was rewatching a couple of them the other day. I want to see this version 2, and I want to sit there like with my eyes wide open and just be blown away by what we're getting in volume 2 of Star Wars Visions. So those are the ones I'm looking at right now in my mind. And yeah, depending on what they release and what extra stuff they release there, we'll see. But there's going to be some great Star Wars art that's already getting teased online. There are an incredible collection of stars that are going to be there to get autographs and pictures with, and all those kinds of things. So the experience looks like it's really shaping up to be one that, if you're a Star Wars fan, you're going to come away with a real great sense of enjoyment. Plus, being in London is a nice little added kick to all of this as well. Yeah. Anything more you want to say on these panels, Laura? Anything more you're hoping? Is there anything you're hoping to see? Anything you hope a panel gets announced for, or you hope gets announced at any of these panels?
I don't know if there's anything I'm necessarily hoping for. I think that look back at Obi-Wan Kenobi, that's pretty high on my list to do on Sunday to try. That might be the last one I can actually hit before I have to catch a flight to Madrid that day.
Oh.
But I really would like to be able to see that. I see right now that on a look back at Obi-Wan Kenobi description on the Celebration site, the actress that plays Reva is not on it, which makes me sort of sad, because I really would love. Yes, I really would like to. I would love to see Moses Ingram-Mathis, but at the same time, if I were her, I wouldn't come near Star Wars again with a 10-foot pole. I don't think. I think I would definitely, after like what happened with this first season and the sort of racism that she encountered. Don't blame her at all, but I am sort of sad to see that she's not going to be on the guest list. I still want to go see that panel though. The other one that I'm really excited to hit is the one that's just, I think, the Star Wars publishing panel. There's High Republic, and then there's just general publishing. Right. So I'm excited to hit that one too. Clone Wars 15-year anniversary. I feel like every once in a while we get these anniversary panels at Celebration, and they're always good. every single one. Like, you kind of think like we know everything, they've hashed it out enough, we've seen all of it before, we've heard it all before. There's always new cool stuff to be revealed. So those tend to be a big, not miss panel over the weekend. So I'm hoping I'll be able to squeeze that in at some point too. 40 years of Return of the Jedi. I'm hoping that we'll get the announcement of a new From a Certain Point of View book. I imagine that's got to be coming up on the docket here. Those anthology books are just so good. I talked about the Red One story that's in the first one, the Star Wars From a Certain Point of View. There's some really, really strong storytelling in those books. So I'm really looking forward to that being hopefully announced either at the publishing panel or at this 40 years of Return of the Jedi.
Well, let's move on to this other thing that dropped and kind of connected to what I was talking about earlier. Laura, do you anticipate that we're going to get an announcement for a theatrical feature or features that are coming here? Because as I'm reading this article that was published in Variety talking about of these films that were announced, Variety has learned that possible Star Wars feature produced by Marvel Studios Kevin Feige is also no longer in active development at Lucasfilm. They also pulled the title of Rogue Squadron and shelved it. Sources with knowledge of the production say it is no longer in active development at the studio. That's a 1-2 punch for Patty Jenkins. They took her off Wonder Woman 3. They're probably going to go in a new direction with Wonder Woman. Gal Gadot might not be back either. And now losing the Star Wars film here, Rogue Squadron, which she did a wonderful video about honoring her father there. So it's a bit of a bummer news for sure. Because, I get Wonder Woman 1984 wasn't great, but Wonder Woman was good. Monster was good. She certainly directed fantastic episodes of television and films. So to take so many L's off one movie seems a bit weird. And then the idea that Taika Waititi would star in his own Star Wars episode is what they're or Star Wars movie is what they're reporting here as well. So what are your feelings about all that? And do you think we'll get a different announcement that'll be a little more positive about the future of Star Wars movies?
We've heard, I think, some rumblings that there might be a Star Wars film announced at Celebration. I think that's whether that came from a reputable source or not, I couldn't say, but I've heard a little bit of whispers of that just in, scrolling on Twitter. And I like to think that it's a very real possibility. Now, despite the fact that Kevin Feige's movie has been shelved, which I'm not hugely disappointed about, to be honest. The Rogue Squadron movie, I wasn't just pilots and space battles in general. I tend to not be super excited about that kind of stuff. So I was happy to see a female director attached to a Star Wars film, but the content itself, I'm not super disappointed to see that it's not happening actually. As far as I understand, I thought the Taika Waititi movie was still not officially shelved. Maybe I'm misremembering.
No, it's not. It's not. But he'll be the star of it. Is what they're reporting, that he wants to make himself the star of that movie.
Oh, interesting. So that'll be. Honestly, it's hard to argue with Taika Waititi because I do like what he does for the most part. I think about Our Flag Means Death, and that's sort of his project, and he's in it, and he's great at it. So he's got some wins and he's got some losses, and I would like to think that he could pull off a win in Star Wars, but that's just me being optimistic. I think this Damon Lindelof project is the one that's most likely to be moving forward. We know that he had a writer's room happen at some point in 2022. Right. We know Dave Filoni was in that writer's room. Dave Filoni's stuff tends to move forward. I like to think that if he had some involvement and he's got as much sway as he does at Lucasfilm, that might account for something. Yeah. And that's one I think we don't know a ton about yet, if I'm not mistaken. So I also kind of hope that if they don't actually have something that's official and moving forward and in a farther stage of development than any of these other projects have gotten.
Yeah.
Shut up. I hope they shut up about it. I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to hear another announcement that ends up being nothing. You're totally right. That video that Patty Jenkins made that paid homage to her dad as a pilot. They made that announcement in 2020 at that stockholder video, something other, and it was fantastic. And how disappointing is that doesn't get to come to fruition, not only for fans who were excited about it and who played the Rogue Squadron video games, but for her, especially that she doesn't get to move forward with that. I feel bad for her in that sense. So I just kind of hope that that they tread carefully. If I walk away from Star Wars Celebration that Monday and they didn't announce a movie, I'm not going to be disappointed. I'm going to be giddy because I just spent the last 4 days neck deep in Star Wars.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be because they announced a movie. So I'll be excited either way. I mean, are you going to is that going to lead to a regret for you if they don't actually announce something?
No, I'm kind of enjoying where we are in Star Wars. I'm not so
Yeah.
hung up on the movies. I'm still burnt from that sequel trilogy, and I know there are Rise of Skywalker defenders. Not trying to offend anybody, but for me personally, I'm burnt from that. I saw some rumors that it's the 10-year anniversary of Force Awakens. We could get Daisy Ridley and John Boyega coming back. I would be shocked out of my effing mind if I saw that they would be
Same.
coming back for a new film or trilogy with them. I would be shocked. So if I don't need to, if that's going to happen, then I will be so happy to be in the room when that gets announced, because I think Daisy really got the short end of the stick. She was fantastic. I know everybody falls all over themselves for Adam Driver as Kylo. Daisy was fantastic as Rey, and no one's going to take my feelings about that away from me. I loved her as Rey, and I would love to see her continue in a better situation to show what she can really do with that role. And Boyega as well, who I think is really showing his chops ever since, in every project he's been in since that's the end of that sequel trilogy. We've seen his abilities as an actor, The Woman King, other things. He is really, really good actor. So to have him come back and have a part that's a little more juicier and has more flesh to it, I think would be great to see. But apart from that, I don't need to see a movie. I don't need to see anything announced. I'm not going to be all broken up if it isn't, because as I said, the books are kicking ass. The TV shows are kicking ass for the most part. The animation is doing well. There's so much that's working for Star Wars that I agree with you, Laura. Unless you've got something really concretely, firmly planted in the ground, is going to happen, is exciting to announce, you've got everybody involved and behind it 100%, then just don't say anything until you do, because you're going to ruin the movie. People are going to get excited and then get dashed to the ground. Ask DC fans how they feel about getting the expectations up only to have them dashed into the ground over and over and over again over the last few years. So I wouldn't want to have that experience yet again at another Star Wars celebration. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that. Yeah, I don't need to. It's cool. I'm cool. Let's take a break for a while.
Right.
Yeah. any final thoughts on any of this, Laura, before we wrap up here at this episode of the Jedi Way? Anything else you wanted to bring up?
No, I don't think I have anything to add other than I would just do a quick shout out to the Bad Batch this week, which was fantastic. The episode The Outpost is another Crosshair centric episode, and it is possibly the best one yet. It's one of my favorite episodes, I think, of this series ever. It was fantastic. Did you get a chance to watch it yet?
Yes, it's so good. And I made a decision with the Outlaw Nation to kind of with the Geek Buddies rather to stop reviewing, because they weren't bringing us in the biggest views. So we kind of stopped. I said, we'll review it at the end of the season. We'll let these episodes play out. And now we've had 2 back-to-back damn good episodes of The Bad Batch. And I'm like, maybe I made a mistake here. So we might be bringing them back now that they've kind of kicked a little ass. So we'll see what happens with that. But certainly, Laura and I have talked about the possibility of mini reviewing them on the Jedi Way as we go weekly here with the Mandalorian stuff. So we may be doing that. But this episode, it was great to see Crosshair back, what they put him through and what was going on with him and the Bad. I just was like, damn, this is good shit. Why haven't we had more of this? I guess is what I was saying in my head the whole time. Why haven't we had more of this, of Crosshair throughout the season, and made this a little more of a storyline that we could have been following with also the Omega stuff? I would have enjoyed both of these things happening in every episode, so we flesh out the world a little bit more and lead to this confrontation with much more juice behind it, in my opinion. So yeah, that's what I would say overall.
Amen. I think that's a great assessment. I mean, if it had been a little bit more balanced between the Batch and Crosshair, I think I would have also been a little bit more enthusiastic about this season. So we'll see where it goes from here, how they close it out from here on out. We're coming in towards the end of the Bad Batch, so I'll be excited to see how they if they stick the landing.
Absolutely. Me too. All right. Well, there you go. That's our episode of the Jedi Way. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it madly. All you Star Wars lovers, we appreciate you all taking a chance and hanging out with us. If it's the first time discovering the show, thank you even more so for taking a chance on us and our conversations here about Star Wars. Laura, another fun show. Please let people know where they can find you and everything you got going on.
Sure. Come find me on Twitter at shutup_Laura, same handle on Instagram. And the show that you can follow the show that I host with my friend Alice, which is an audio only podcast called the Force Toast, a Star Wars happy hour. That is at Force Toast Pod on Twitter and Instagram.
And have you been on anything recently? And have you been a guest on any shows that people could go back and listen to over the last week or so?
Not in the last week or so. This is a lot between trying to take notes on Bad Batch and The Mandalorian and still just have a life. So I am very much enjoying trying to sort of pace myself and keep my peace. And I, haven't been doing a ton of guest spots. It's been kind of a lot, but which is fine. I mean, how about you? Are you jumping into any other shows, talking more Star Wars?
Oh, no, not yet. No. And listen, if anybody hosts a Star Wars show, I would happily come on your Star Wars show. I would be excited to be on. So, and I'm always shy about reaching out to other Star Wars shows that are much bigger than ours to be like, hey, I'd love to come on, because I always feel like I'm begging and I'm not really good at that kind of stuff. So, but if anyone happens to be watching and would like me to come on, I'm always open to come on and have some fun. I can find time in my schedule because I love talking this Star Wars stuff. And I love hearing other people's perspective on it as well, which is always fun whenever I'm on one of those shows. So there you go. That's my 2 cents. All right. That's Laura Kelly. You can find me at the Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, the Outlaw Nation on Twitch. And please remember to subscribe to the channel. You guys enjoy the Geek Buddies. You enjoy the Hot Mic. You enjoy the Jedi Way. You enjoy so much we got here. Please remember to subscribe to the channel down below and hit that bell button. I'm on a march to get to 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I would love your help in doing that here on the channel. Remember to leave a like on this video and leave comments down below. What did you think about what Laura and I had to say about The Mandalorian? What we had to say about Star Wars Celebration, about the movies? What do you want to see? What did we miss? What did you hope we want us to talk about in the future? Let us know all of that down there in the comment section below. And always remember, every show we do here on the Outlaw Nation is available on the Outlaw Nation podcast feed. The Hot Mic has its own feed. The Geek Buddies have their own feed, but everything else is underneath the Outlaw Nation podcast window there. So go and find that in case you don't want to watch our pretty faces and you just want to listen to us. It's all going to be there on the podcast feed. All right, Laura, what do we got to tell them before we wrap up here?
We got to tell them to remember that your focus determines your reality.